It's strange how love and tragedy can weave themselves together, like threads you can't untangle. If someone had asked me years ago what love meant, I would have said late-night laughter, butterflies in my stomach, and the warmth of someone who knows you better than anyone else. But life has a cruel way of showing you that love is never that simple. This is a story of how love almost broke me, and how, against all odds, it remade me. I met Daniel at the DMV of all places, that gray, lifeless room where time slows to a crawl. He sat down next to me, sighed, and muttered, "This is worse than purgatory." I laughed, and that one laugh turned into an hour-long conversation that made me forget where I was. By the time our numbers were called, he asked me out for coffee. Daniel wasn't perfect, but there was something about him, his crooked smile, his sharp wit, his piercing gray eyes, that made him unforgettable. Our first date turned into a second, then a third, and before long we were inseparable. He was a freelance designer, so he had the freedom to surprise me at work or drag me away for spontaneous weekend trips. He had a way of making me feel like I was the center of his world. He did mention once that he'd been engaged before, but when I asked, he brushed it off. "It didn't work out," was all he said. I didn't push. Everyone has their scars. The first 2 years together were blissful. We moved into a little apartment with creaky wooden floors and walls, so thin we could hear the neighbors arguing. We painted the kitchen a ridiculous shade of yellow because he said it was a color of happiness. We bickered about dishes, laughed about it later, and always ended in kisses. When he proposed to me at a friend's backyard party under a canopy of string lights, I said yes without hesitation. It felt like the next chapter of something already perfect. But perfection has cracks, and they started to show months before the wedding. Daniel became restless, distracted. He would disappear for hours, sometimes coming home smelling faintly of whiskey. He claimed it was just a drink with a friend, but his eyes told a different story. When I asked what was wrong, he smiled too tightly and said, "I'm fine, just stress." I wanted to believe him, so I did. Then I found the letter. It was tucked in his desk drawer, crumpled and worn, but the words still felt sharp and fresh. "I can't believe you chose her. I thought it would always be us. If you change your mind, you know where to find me." Signed only with an initial, L. My chest tightened as I confronted him that night. "Who is L?" I demanded. His face drained a color. It's complicated," he stammered. "Complicated how?" "She was my fiancée. Before you, things ended badly. She's not stable. I didn't want you dragged into it." He swore he hadn't seen her in years, that she was nothing but the past. Against my better judgment, I let it go. Love can blind you to the storm on the horizon. 2 weeks later, the storm hit. Daniel was in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit him head-on. The doctors called it a miracle that he survived, but his injuries were severe. A traumatic brain injury left him fragile and unpredictable. He couldn't work, couldn't drive, sometimes couldn't even remember what day it was. Overnight, I went from fiancé to caretaker. I put our wedding on hold and told myself love would be enough to carry us through. But love is harder when it means sleepless nights, sudden outbursts, and watching the person you adore turn into someone you barely recognize. Daniel would forget conversations we'd had minutes earlier. Sometimes he cried uncontrollably. Other times he looked at me with blank eyes, as if I were a stranger. Then the phone call started. The landline would ring late at night. When I answered, silence, sometimes faint breathing, and sometimes a whisper. He was mine first. I never told Daniel. I didn't want to burden him. But inside, fear gnawed at me. The worst night came when I arrived home and found Daniel walking down the street hand in hand with a woman. My stomach dropped. She was tall, striking, with dark hair and an unsettling presence. When she saw me, she smiled coldly. "This is Elle," Daniel said awkwardly. She wanted to talk. Talk, that's what he called it. The woman who wrote the letter, who whispered on the phone, was suddenly here, holding his hand. She began to insert herself into our lives like she belonged there. She brought him meals, offered to drive him to appointments, lingered far too long in our apartment. Daniel, vulnerable and confused, seemed grateful. He didn't see the manipulation behind her every gesture, the way she looked at me like I was an intruder. One night, I overheard her in the kitchen whispering, "You don't belong with her. You know it was always supposed to be us." "I'm engaged," Daniel said weakly. "You were engaged to me first," she hissed. I stormed in, trembling with rage. "Get out," I shouted. "He's not yours anymore." She smirked. "We'll see." From then on, things spiraled. Daniel grew more distant, confused about his memories. Sometimes he called me by her name. I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was losing him to his injury or to her. The breaking point came when I found him sitting close on the couch, her hand on his knee, his face inches from hers. It wasn't a kiss, but it was close enough to shatter me. I packed a bag and left that night, convinced our love was dead. But love, I learned, isn't so easily buried. A week later, Daniel's sister called me in a panic. Elle had been arrested. She had broken into his apartment in the middle of the night, trying to crawl into bed beside him. Daniel, terrified, called his sister, who called the police. It all unraveled after that. Elle had been stalking him for years, even before I came into the picture. She had orchestrated the phone calls, the letters, even accidental run-ins. She never let go of the idea that he belonged to her. For the first time, I realized it wasn't Daniel betraying me. It was her obsession twisting everything. When I went back, Daniel was shaken but clearer than I'd seen him in months. "I don't remember everything," he admitted, "but I know I love you, and I know I want to spend whatever life I have left with you." It wasn't a fairy tale recovery. Healing took years, therapy, tears, and rebuilding trust brick by brick. But slowly we found our way back. We married quietly, just family present, no grand gestures. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about survival, about love that had been tested by fire and still endured. Now, when I look back on it all, the accident, the haunting shadow of Elle, the nights I thought we were finished, I realized the tragedy didn't destroy us. It reshaped us. Love, real love, isn't about being untouched. It's about enduring, surviving, and coming out stronger than before. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are not the ones free of tragedy, but the ones that survive it.